At 5:17 local time in the northern Arabian Sea, the first flash appears on the screen so suddenly it almost seems like a radar error. Inside the operations center of the outer screen destroyer, no one speaks for half a second. Then the tactical action officer leans in, eyes fixed on the display, and the entire room shifts in an instant. New surface-to-air track bearing 038, fast mover, low altitude. A second contact appears, then a third. The silence is gone. The compartment fills with clipped voices, rapid keyboard strokes, headset traffic, and the steady mechanical hum of a ship moving from routine watch into full defensive posture without wasting a single motion. On the main display, 3 tracks stretch out from the Iranian coastline, moving low and fast over the dark water toward the carrier group. No one in the room needs an explanation. The profile says enough. Still, the officer at the console calls it clearly. Possible coastal launch, multiple inbound. Time to outer screen, under 4 minutes. Above them, on the bridge, the sea still looks calm. Dawn is only beginning to rise over the horizon, turning the water a flat steel blue, quiet enough to hide what is coming. But across the formation, alerts are already moving faster than the sunrise. On the carrier, flight deck crews freeze mid-step and instinctively look toward the island. On the cruiser off the port side, spy radar is already tracking the contacts and feeding the data into the network. On the destroyer closest to the threat axis, the captain steps to the center line of the bridge and looks out through glass reflecting only instruments and tension. His voice stays controlled. Set condition 3 throughout the screen. Authorization held pending final confirmation. The order moves through the ship like electricity through wire. Below deck, sailors secure themselves at stations. Hatches are sealed. Consoles come fully alive. On the weather decks, mounts rotate just enough to be noticed, but not enough to waste a movement. At the center of the formation, the carrier holds course. No sudden turn, no dramatic break, just disciplined speed, disciplined spacing, and disciplined trust in a defensive chain that now has to function perfectly. Back inside CIC, the data becomes sharper. The tracks are low, sea-skimming, and accelerating. One operator changes filters, checks the picture again, and then speaks louder. Confirmed. Not aircraft, not surface clutter. These are incoming anti-ship weapons. A pause follows. Then the tactical action officer answers with a calm so controlled it almost sounds cold. Report to the group. Multiple anti-ship missiles inbound from the Iranian coast. The message goes out across the secure net instantly. Every ship in the formation receives it almost at the same moment. The carrier group is no longer watching a possible situation develop. It is now inside a live engagement. At 5:18, bridge-to-bridge warnings are transmitted on open channels. Iranian coastal station. Iranian coastal station. This is a United States Navy formation operating lawfully in international waters. You are engaging U.S. naval vessels. Cease immediately. No response. A second transmission follows, firmer this time, then a third. Still nothing comes back except static. That silence says enough. This is not a probe, not a show of pressure, not an attempt to push the formation away with radar signals and radio traffic. Someone on that shoreline has already made the decision to launch. Now the only question is whether the first American intercept happens far from the carrier or dangerously close to it. At 5:19, the formation begins to adjust. The outer destroyers widen slightly, angling their hulls to improve intercept geometry. The cruiser shifts just enough to cover another corridor. On the carrier's island, air defense officers study the tactical plot, while deck crews secure loose equipment and clear exposed parts of the flight deck. There is no yelling. The choreography is too practiced for that. The men and women here have drilled this scenario countless times. Now it is real, and reality is always quieter than people expect. Inside the lead destroyer's CIC, one of the inbound tracks suddenly divides on the screen, then another. Stand by, the operator says, his voice tightening for the first time. Additional returns. We've got more. Total inbound count now 5. Correction, 6. That number lands heavily. The first 3 were serious. 6 means intention. 6 means planning. 6 means whoever launched them was not relying on a single lucky hit. They were counting on saturation. They were counting on confusion. They were counting on at least one American ship reacting too slowly in the opening moments. But slow is not what this formation is. The Aegis operator begins assigning priorities. Range numbers fall, impact timers shrink, symbols tighten toward the outer screen. Then one of the incoming tracks changes course. Not much, just a small shift. But it is enough for everyone in the room to notice. It is no longer focused on the nearest destroyer. It is reaching deeper into the formation. Toward the center, toward the carrier. On the bridge, the captain studies the updated plot for one long second. Then he gives the command every sailor aboard has been waiting to hear. Final confirmation received. Weapons free. Inside CIC, nobody reacts on the outside. No one cheers, no one hesitates. They simply move faster. Target data locks in, fire control solutions steady. Missile teams stand ready, holding their breath for a moment so brief it barely feels like breathing at all. Across the formation, American warships are now only seconds away from responding with force. And on every screen in the carrier group, one fact is impossible to ignore. Iran has launched first, and the first wave is still closing in. At 5:19 local time, the first intercept solution is confirmed. Inside the Aegis Destroyer's Combat Information Center, the tactical display no longer feels like a map, it feels like a countdown. 6 hostile tracks are moving low over the water. Each one is fast enough to turn even a moment of hesitation into real danger. Their altitude is extremely low. Their spacing is intentional. Their routes are designed to stretch the defensive screen and force the carrier group to respond in layers. The tactical action officer does not blink. Engage outer raid. Assign shooters. Prioritize inbound tracks 1 through 4. Hold close layer for anything that breaks through. That single order says everything. Stop the first wave as far out as possible. Keep the final shield ready for anything that slips past. Across the strike group, the response is immediate. Data from the cruiser, the destroyers, and the carrier's own sensors blends into one shared picture. Every ship sees the same tracks. Every watch team sees the same geometry. Every captain understands the same reality. If the outer screen does not stop them, the pressure moves inward fast. On the forward edge of the formation, the first destroyer turns only a few degrees, just enough to sharpen its radar angle. Another ship on the port side mirrors the adjustment. They are not leaving formation. They are shaping a defensive zone. Track 1, hostile, bearing 037, range decreasing. Track 2, hostile, same corridor. Track 3, maneuvering. Track 4, stable, sea skimming. The numbers keep falling. Then the order comes. Fire. From deep inside the ship, the vertical launch system responds with exact, brutal precision. An interceptor rises from its cell, rolls into the dawn, and ignites over the water. A second follows almost instantly, then a third. From far away, the launches look clean, sharp, almost silent. Inside CIC, no one has time to admire them. Every eye stays locked on the scope, waiting for symbols to close, overlap, and disappear. The first intercept happens far from the formation. One hostile track flickers once, then vanishes. Splash 1. No celebration, just confirmation. A second American interceptor climbs, arcs, and drives toward another inbound track. The hostile weapon shifts low, trying to hide in the clutter just above the sea, but the system has already calculated the move. Splash 2. 2 stopped. 4 still coming. At the carrier's centerline, the flight deck has changed completely in less than a minute. Yellow shirts, red shirts, handlers, ordnance crews. Everyone moves with the focused urgency of people who understand what is at stake. If even one inbound breaks through, the open steel of the flight deck could become the next point of impact. Aircraft that were being prepared for routine operations are now being secured, chained down, and moved away from exposed positions. Fire crews wait near key areas with charged hoses and full gear ready. No one is moving wildly, everyone is moving fast. On the carrier's bridge, the air defense commander listens to the net while studying the tactical plot. 2 intercepts at range, 1 more in progress. But the shape of the engagement is changing. Back along the destroyer screen, one Iranian inbound suddenly drops even lower and swings wide, slipping under the cleanest radar angle. Another follows seconds later, offset just enough to make the timing more difficult. The operator calls it out immediately. Raid is splitting. 2 inbound pushing south corridor. Possible saturation tactic. That is exactly what it is. The missiles were never intended to arrive in a clean, predictable line. They were sent to stretch the formation, pull the escorts apart, force early launches, and create one opening. Just one, wide enough for something to slip through. The cruiser on the carrier's flank takes the next engagement. Cruiser has the shot. A fresh pair of interceptors bursts from their cells and climbs into the brightening sky. On the shared tactical display, the geometry closes fast. For 2 seconds, 3 symbols drive straight toward the same point. Then one hostile track disappears. Splash 3. The second does not. It survives the first engagement window and keeps coming, skimming so low over the water that for a moment it almost blends into the surface picture. Now the room grows quieter. Not because the situation is improving, because the threat is closer. At 5:20, the outer layer has done most of its job, but not all of it. 3 hostile missiles are confirmed intercepted. A 4th appears damaged or breaking apart somewhere beyond visual range. But 2 are still inbound, and one of them is no longer focused on the screen destroyer. It is reaching inward, toward the carrier's defensive ring. The tactical action officer shifts immediately. Reassign, hold long shots on Leaker 2, prepare close layer. I say again, prepare close layer. That changes the feeling on every ship in the formation. Long-range intercepts are controlled by systems, timing, and distance. Fast, precise, almost clinical. Close layer defense is different. It means the timeline is collapsing. It means sailors topside may hear the engagement instead of only watching it on a screen. It means the next intercept has to happen with almost no room left. On one of the escorting destroyers, the close-in team brings its system to full readiness. The mount slews, radar locks, ammunition feeds. Everything now depends on seconds, angles, and flawless timing. Inside the carrier's island, the plot updates again. One missile is still outside the inner ring. The other has crossed it. No one speaks for a moment. Then CIC breaks the silence. Leaker confirmed. Bearing 041. Fast. Very fast. Out on the water, there is still no visible fireball, no towering plume, no cinematic chaos. Just dawn, sea haze, and a carrier group holding formation while a low-flying threat races across the surface toward it. Then, the officer aboard the destroyer says the words that tighten every nerve across the network. Target is inside the kill box. At 5:20 local time, the missile breaks into the inner ring. On the tactical display, the symbol is small, steady, and moving far too quickly. Inside the destroyer's combat information center, everyone understands what it means. The outer layer performed its role, but not perfectly. One Iranian sea-skimming missile has survived the long-range intercepts and is now running low over the water, using the curve of the sea and the clutter of the surface to stay hidden for just a few seconds longer. A few seconds is all it needs. Leaker bearing 041, range 9 miles. The voice stays controlled, but the number hits hard. 9 miles at that speed is not distance. It is time disappearing. On the destroyer nearest the carrier's starboard quarter, the close defense team is already locked in. The ship angles slightly, placing itself between the inbound track and the center of the formation. It is not a dramatic maneuver, just steel shifting a few degrees with absolute purpose. Enough to tighten the geometry, enough to take the first look, enough to become the shield if the next intercept misses. On the bridge, the captain watches the horizon through glass washed pale by early morning light. He does not need anyone to explain what the ship is doing. He gave the order before anyone had to ask. Hold course, keep the carrier covered. Below him, the weapon mount turns with mechanical calm. Radar refines the track. Fire control narrows the solution. Every system on board is now focused on one task. Stop that missile before it crosses the final line. Behind them, the carrier remains in formation. No sudden breakaway turn, no panic acceleration, no smoke, no disorder, no loss of control. Just the center of the strike group trusting its escorts to do exactly what they were built to do. Back in CIC, the range continues to fall. 8 miles, track stable, altitude unchanged. That last detail matters. The missile is not climbing for a final dive. It is staying low, hugging the surface, forcing the defense to work against a shrinking horizon and almost no margin. It was built for this, launched from the coast, pushed low across open water, designed not to announce itself, but to arrive. Then another voice cuts in from the cruiser net. Second leaker still outbound from the north corridor. Delayed track, possible follow-up. Nobody aboard the destroyer reacts outwardly, but the meaning is clear. This is no longer just one missile that made it through. There may be another one following behind it. The formation could be only seconds away from handling 2 close-range engagements almost back-to-back. But the first threat is already inside the final window. Range 6 miles. The order comes immediately. Engage close layer. A defensive interceptor launches from the escort destroyer with sharp, controlled force. It climbs, rolls, and drives toward the incoming track. For one brief second, the display compresses into a single knot of converging symbols. Then, the moment passes. The hostile track remains. No confirmed intercept. Inside CIC, nobody reacts with panic. Nobody freezes. Training pushes emotion aside and leaves only procedure. Interceptor missed. Re-engage. Now the room feels different. Not louder, smaller, because every person inside understands the same hard truth. The first close-range attempt did not stop it, and the missile is still coming. Range 4 miles. On the carrier's island, officers stare at the same data and speak only when necessary. Flight deck crews stay low behind equipment and secured aircraft. Emergency teams are already positioned. The massive ship continues forward, but the tension across her decks has become almost physical, like pressure building in the air before impact. From the escort destroyer's weather deck, the missile still cannot be seen. There is only glare on the water and a hard line of horizon. But the ship's systems see it clearly, and that is enough. The captain speaks once. Take it. This time, the answer does not come from the missile cells. It comes from much closer in. The close-in defense system comes alive with a rising mechanical roar, fast and precise, tracking quicker than any human eye could follow. Radar holds the target. The barrels rotate. The final shield is now fully awake. Range 3 miles. Then 2.5. Then 2. The system opens up. From the outside, it looks like a dense stream of metal, reaching out over the water toward a point that still appears empty. A fraction of a second later, that empty point is not empty anymore. The missile appears for the first time, low, fast, barely above the surface. Then the defensive rounds meet it. The sea ahead of the formation erupts into a sharp, tearing breakup just off the starboard axis. Not a clean cinematic burst. Not a perfect ball of flame, just a sudden, forceful disintegration, close enough for fragments and burning debris to scatter across the water in a widening spray. The shock rolls low over the surface. Pieces strike the sea and skip away into the wake. Inside CIC, the symbol disappears. Half a second later, the call comes through. Splash! Splash confirmed. No one celebrates. It was too close for that. On the destroyer's bridge, the windows tremble faintly from the pressure wave. On the carrier, sailors instinctively lower their heads as a sharp orange flash reflects across the waterline. For one moment, everyone in the formation understands exactly how narrow the margin was. The shield held, but only just. Then the next report arrives. New emissions from the Iranian coast. Another operator turns in his chair. Thermal spike at probable launch area. Additional radar activity inland. The tactical action officer looks back at the display. The first leaker is gone. The second delayed track remains uncertain, but farther east beyond the haze over the sea, the shoreline is becoming active again. He says it quietly. They're not finished. At 5:21 local time, as smoke still drifts above the water where the first missile was intercepted, American surveillance assets begin confirming the one thing nobody in the carrier group wanted to hear. The launch sites along the Iranian coast are active again. At 5:21 local time, the fight changes direction. Until now, the carrier group has been reacting, tracking, intercepting, absorbing pressure, holding the line. But the moment American sensors confirm fresh signals from the Iranian coastline, reacting is no longer enough. The incoming salvo was not a single launch from a hidden vehicle that got lucky. It was part of an active coastal launch network, and that network is still awake. Inside the carrier's combat direction center, the tactical picture becomes clearer with every passing second. Radar activity, heat signatures, possible launcher movement, multiple signals grouped along a narrow stretch of shoreline. The air warfare commander leans over the display and studies the geometry in silence. The tracks from the first salvo are still ghosted on the screen, stretching from shore to sea like marks that have not yet faded. Now, new information is being layered over them. Electronic support data from the escorts, infrared collection from airborne assets, bearing cuts from ships that, only minutes earlier, were defending the formation at close range. Each piece of data matters on its own. Together, they point to something specific. Probable coastal battery, one operator says. Mobile launch element with radar support. Another voice breaks in over the net. Secondary emitter just came up inland. Different angle. Could be queuing, could be backup fire control. That is enough. The carrier group does not need speeches. It does not need anger. It needs certainty. And certainty is arriving in layers. Someone on that coast launched the first wave. Someone on that coast is preparing the next one. Now the only question is whether the American response can break the chain before another inbound leaves the shoreline. On the carrier's bridge, the Admiral receives the update with the same controlled stillness that has marked the entire engagement. Do we have a clean fix? The reply comes immediately. Good enough to suppress, improving by the second. He nods once. Turn the fight around. Those 5 words move through the formation faster than any signal on the screen. Across the strike group, the posture changes. The escorts keep their sensors pointed seaward, still holding the defensive line in case another wave is already airborne. But behind that shield, the carrier's air wing is now being brought to life for a different purpose. This is no longer only defense. This is counteraction. On the flight deck, crews that moments earlier were preparing for the next inbound are now preparing aircraft for launch. Chocks come free. Chains are pulled away. Ordnance teams move beneath the wings with the practiced precision of sailors who have done this in darkness, in rain, in heavy seas, and now under real pressure. Jet fuel hangs sharp in the morning air. Engines begin to rise one by one. No disorder, just momentum. The first aircraft are not launching to send a message. They are launching to build a corridor. Electronic warfare support goes first because coastal batteries remain dangerous only as long as they can see, communicate, and cue their systems. Break the radar picture, disrupt the network, and the launcher becomes what it truly is. A machine in the open, waiting to be located. Inside the strike planning cell, the sequence is laid out in calm, clipped terms. First, identify which emitter is guiding the battery. Second, suppress radar and targeting support. Third, isolate the launch element from any backup node. Fourth, disable the launcher and its support vehicles before they can relocate. This is not emotion. This is systems warfare. Out over the water, an airborne early warning aircraft widens the picture. Farther back, passive sensors begin sorting the shoreline into patterns of normal activity and patterns of threat. One cluster stays dark, another flickers, then goes silent. A third holds steady for too long to be harmless. That one draws attention immediately. Emitter holding, thermal source stationary, vehicle signatures nearby, possible launcher position. The strike lead hears it all through his headset as his aircraft is brought onto the catapult. He does not need the entire story, he needs the pressure point. The exact place where one precise action can force the coastal battery to choose between moving and staying exposed. He gets it. At 5:28, the first American aircraft leave the deck. They launch in a disciplined sequence, noses pointed east, staying low over the water before climbing into the brightening sky. Behind them, the carrier keeps moving, still guarded, still alert, still prepared for the possibility that the coast may attempt one last shot before the network closes around it. The escorts do not relax. Their radars remain fixed on the sea approaches. Their combat teams keep watching for anything that slips through. Even with the strike package airborne, no one assumes the danger has passed. That is what keeps a formation alive. Not confidence, not anger, discipline. Then the first effect appears. A radar source along the Iranian coast, steady for almost 2 minutes, suddenly flickers, spikes, and drops off the picture. 1 second later, another emitter appears farther inland, weaker and rushed, like a backup node trying to take control of a fight that is already slipping away. The air warfare commander watches the plot update. "They're shifting control," someone answers at once. "Too late." Offshore, the American aircraft continue inbound. The shoreline that looked protected only minutes earlier no longer feels protected. Its firing chain is exposed now. Every radar pulse, every heat signature, every attempted handoff has made the network easier to map. Iran launched from the coast, believing distance would shield the battery. Instead, the launch revealed where the battery was, how it was connected, and how it operated. That was the real mistake. Not simply launching first and failing to stop the response. At 5:31, one of the strike aircraft confirms contact with the primary target area. The pilot does not see a battlefield in the dramatic sense. He sees signatures, metal, heat, movement, geometry, a launch position tucked near the coast, support vehicles close by, a radar element trying to go quiet far too late. He rolls in. Outside the formation, the escorts keep watching the sea. At the center, the carrier holds steady, and on the Iranian shoreline, the first launch site that challenged a U.S. carrier group is now seconds away from being taken out of the fight. At 5:31 local time, the coastline flashes on the pilot's sensors as they come in low over the water. It is not a triumphant moment, not in the cockpit. There is no celebration, no pause to admire the result, just confirmation, geometry, and the next threat in sequence. The primary launch site that had lit up minutes earlier is now a broken signature on the feed. Heat spreading. Radar gone. Vehicles moving in confusion or not moving at all. Primary target suppressed. The call crosses the net flat and professional. A second later, another voice adds the part that matters more. No new launches detected. Out at sea, inside the American carrier group, that is the first real shift in the engagement. Not because the danger is over, because the tempo has changed. For the first time since the first inbound tracks rose from the Iranian coast, the strike group is no longer just absorbing pressure. It now controls the momentum. The escorts are still scanning every corridor. Fire control teams remain at live consoles. Weapons stay ready. But now the network is reaching outward, not only defending inward. The sea lanes ahead of the formation are quiet again, and the shoreline that tried to set the terms of the encounter is suddenly the one under pressure. On the bridge of the carrier, nobody confuses that with safety. The Admiral studies the tactical picture as reports continue arriving in short, clipped fragments. One probable launcher neutralized. One coastal radar source down. One backup emitter disrupted. Possible vehicle movement inland. No confirmed third salvo. That last line matters. Only minutes earlier, the group had been preparing to face another wave. Now the Iranian firing chain is fractured badly enough that even its remaining elements are struggling to coordinate. The carrier remains underway, steady and intact. At the center of the formation, aircraft are still launching and recovering. Deck crews are back at work beneath a sky that, less than 15 minutes earlier, had become a corridor of inbound fire. That is the real measure of the outcome. The mission did not collapse. The formation did not scatter. The carrier did not lose the deck. Iran launched from the coast expecting pressure, disruption, maybe even panic. Instead, they revealed something far more dangerous for themselves, the full rhythm of an American naval response. Detect, absorb, sort, isolate, respond. And do it before the other side has time to reset. On one of the escort destroyers, the crew assigned to the close defense system stays at full readiness even after the immediate danger has passed. Their system had stopped the missile that came closest to the carrier, the one that slipped into the inner ring and forced the final shield to act. They know exactly how narrow the margin was. They know how close the fragments landed. They know what it feels like when a sea-skimming missile is stopped almost directly in front of the formation. No one on that ship will mistake a successful intercept for comfort, not after a morning like this. Below deck, damage control teams complete rapid inspections. A few systems on the escort show shock alerts from the close intercept. Some exposed equipment needs to be checked again. Antennas are inspected. Weapon mounts are verified. But the most important report remains the same across the entire group. No ship lost, no ship taken out of the mission, no carrier strike operation broken. The formation is still moving, and it is still moving in order. Farther east, the strike aircraft continue applying pressure just long enough to make sure the coast stays quiet. Not recklessly. Not deeper than necessary. Not for spectacle. Just enough to ensure the remaining pieces of the battery do not get a second chance to reorganize and launch again. That restraint says as much as the response itself. The goal was never noise. The goal was control, and that is where the message truly lands. Iran's coastal battery had counted on the shoreline as protection. Launch from land, force the Americans into defense, then disappear behind terrain, distance, and political risk. But coastal missile warfare only works if the first wave creates confusion. If it fails, the launch becomes evidence. Radar activity becomes coordinates. Heat signatures become markers. The firing chain becomes a map, and maps can be followed. By 5:40 local time, the sea ahead of the carrier group almost looks normal again. The horizon is pale. The water is calm. The outer escorts still hold their spacing. The cruiser remains on station. The carrier continues forward with the same heavy confidence it had before the first warning appeared. But beneath that calm surface, the balance has changed completely. Iran launched first. Iran lost surprise. Iran exposed the location and structure of its coastal launch network. And the United States Navy did exactly what it is trained to do for decades. Stay disciplined long enough for the enemy's opening move to become their worst mistake. That is the part many people miss. The side that moves first does not always control the fight. The side that controls the sequence does. At 5:42, the final assessment of the opening engagement begins to settle across the formation. One near breakthrough, multiple successful intercepts, one coastal battery suppressed, no follow-up launch confirmed, carrier operations sustained. A clean tactical result, but not a comfortable one, because everyone in that strike group understands what this morning really was. A reminder that modern naval combat moves in seconds, that the gap between warning and impact is shorter than most people imagine, and that the difference between a successful defense and disaster can come down to one system, one crew, and one perfectly timed response. The carrier pushes on, the escorts stay sharp, the coastline remains under watch. And across the internal net, the mood is not celebration. It is something colder, more professional, more dangerous. The group has seen the battery. The battery has been hit. And next time, if another launcher on that shore turns toward open water, it will already know what comes back. Not panic, not confusion, not empty warnings, just American steel arriving in sequence.